Hi, everybody. Welcome to Day Drinking with Authors, the interview series where I pick a book, the author picks a drink, and we chat about both of them. Tonight's a really good one. Yesterday, I was sick. Like, I had a cold. I mean, I guess we get those again. I don't know. My poor immune system, didn't know what hit it. So yesterday, I got to lie in bed and read this book, and it was exactly, not to use a cliche, but it was exactly what the doctor ordered. So tonight we're talking to Sally Kilpatrick, author of Much Ado About BBQ. Yeah, and it's as cute as the title. Oh no, did I lose my I'm gonna read the back cover copy. Bear with me real quick. I clicked away from the page, as you do. So Much Ado About BBQ is book 6 in the Ellery Tennessee series. And the back cover copy, Emma Sutton promised herself 3 things. She would never move back to Ellery, never work in the family barbecue restaurant, and never have anything to do with Ben Cates ever again. Losing her job and her home might have forced her to break the first 2, but she's determined to keep the third. Unlike Emma, Ben Cates has made peace with his hometown. He wants nothing more than to make his restaurant something his father couldn't, a success. But between his hell-raising little sister and Emma Sutton's return to Ellery, his dream could easily be snatched away. Emma and Ben might have made each other's childhood a living hell with their endless pranks, but the only way to finally get rid of the other is to win the coveted contract for Ellery's annual barbecue festival. Seems easy enough until attraction ignites like a charcoal flame and happiness seeps in like a surprising new flavor. Can they find the courage to forgive bitter past mistakes and let trust into the mix, or will devastating secrets burn everything down again? Let's bring in Sally. Hey, Sally.
Hello.
When you hear back cover copy, are you always like, yeah, I wrote that. I guess I wrote that. Did I write that?
I do, but there's something special about this back cover copy. It was kind of done by committee.
Oh.
So, an informal committee of my fellow writers. So I read and I'm like, oh yeah, Sonali Dave came up with that line, I think. I can't even remember who all helped, but it was all it. I think everybody was involved on that group chat. So, yay for group efforts!
Yay for group efforts! And back cover copy, as someone who does like self-publishing and traditional publishing, that's hard. It's hard.
Really hard. It's really hard. That's why I was asking for help, because I was like, I wrote the whole book, but how shall I sum it up?
That's got to be somebody else's job.
Right.
It's like the early days when, like, you talk to somebody and they're like, what's your book about? And you're like, oh, well, and then 20 minutes later,
deals,
so much stuff
happens.
Exactly. So you are drinking tonight. We're drinking old fashions. You're drinking a new old fashioned. That was what your recipe said.
I am. There is a website called Cookie and Kate, and my husband found it, and it's vegetarian recipes. And I should say at this point that I'm the daughter of a man who raised beef cattle, but these are all great recipes. I'm at least part of the time a vegetarian, which is probably better for me. This one
better for all
includes maple syrup instead of simple syrup, and I like it.
Yeah, I have like a Frankenstein old fashioned and I've been drinking old fashions quite a bit over the course of the lockdown.
Who among us?
I know. It's been a favorite, but so I have my old fashions. I don't use simple syrup. I use cherry liqueur.
Oh, okay.
They're a bit more Manhattan-y. I guess they're just a bit more Manhattan.
Yeah. See, I am a weirdo, and I don't even have a cherry in this. I don't want a cherry in it.
What kind of monster are you, Sally?
I like my old fashions the way Bess Truman liked hers. There is a story there. Would you like to hear the story about Bess Truman and the old fashions? Okay.
Yes.
So, she and Harry, they're at the White House. He's been sworn in. They've got, famous chefs and mixologists. And the bartender is like determined. He's like, what do you want, Ms. Truman? She's like, I want an old fashioned. And he's very proud of it. And he asks her how it is. And she's like, it's all right. So he just goes on this quest to try to make the old fashioned that she's looking for. And this goes on for a couple of days. And finally, he just gets put out, and it's basically all bourbon.
Oh,
And she says, perfect.
that is a
And
woman of a certain age. My grandmother was a gin
to
martini.
Bess.
Yeah. My
Mhm.
grandmother was a gin martini woman. And come to find out, her gin martini was gin. No, you gin, and then you wave the vermouth over the bottom. That was how she liked it. A
Look,
glass of cold gin for those women of that era.
I'm never gonna forget. We were in Disney World, and they had this thing where you did drinks and dessert,
Oh.
which very bad combination if you ask me. It should have been like drinks and chicken fingers or something like that, you know.
Mhm.
Well, this guy was there from Knob Creek talking about bourbon and talking about his father who had had bourbon every day of his life. And the doctor kept trying to tell him to quit drinking it. And he's like, how are you going to tell an 85, 90-year-old man to stop drinking bourbon? I don't think you are at that point. He said, I mean, if you cut him off, he'd probably keel over right there. And then when they went to embalm him, he'd go, oh, that's the stuff. So,
Yeah.
ah,
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain reality to a cocktail a day, right? And then suddenly not having that cocktail a day. I mean, I know that, like, not to belabor my grandmother, but when that glass of gin became a glass of water with with gin waved over the glass, like it was a transition for sure. So anyway, but we're not here to talk about
no, we're not. But while we're here,
while we're here. So Much Ado About Barbecue. So this is the 6th book in really your very charming Southern fiction,
Aw,
Southern
thank you.
romance series.
Mhm.
And it's a retelling. It is a retelling of Much Ado
It's
About Nothing.
loose. It's pretty loose. Well, I mean, it's loose, but for anybody who's
You
actually read
waved
Much
the
Ado,
retelling.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I waved Shakespeare over it. But, for those who have read the play, there are certain little nods in there that hopefully little Easter eggs for the true diehard folks.
well, I'm not a real, I mean, obviously the title, but I'm not a huge Shakespeare diehard, but you had the matchmaking, right? You had the
Mhm.
bad guy, you had
Yep,
the lord coming into
did.
town to sort of like,
I did.
yeah, it's so
You
it
caught
was.
it all.
So
Um
was your idea that you wanted to do a retelling, or was your idea that you wanted to do warring barbecue houses, and this was
It really started with warring barbecue houses, and I was, throwing titles out to my agent, the fabulous Sarah Younger, and I had thought about Hog Wild, and she's like, "Sally, no." It was very much, "No, baby, no." Um, and for some reason, I said, "Much Ado About Barbecue," and she said, "Yes." And at that point, I'm like, "Well, why not? You love Much Ado About Nothing anyway. You love barbecue. Lean in." So that's kind of how that started. But once I started with started plotting it out, it just kind of fell into place.
well, it gives you, it's funny, I was going to ask you about and I don't think it's just me in my reading experience right now. I think retellings are a thing that is happening in a
Mhm.
big way. Um, what is the pleasure of writing, doing an homage or doing a retelling? And what it like, I mean, I know what it feels like on the reader side, but like as a writer, are you like,
Well, okay, so this is my 2020 book.
I mean,
Yeah. So I think the retelling was kind of a safety net.
oh,
You know, when you have a story in mind, you want to tell. Obviously, I came up with the story first, the idea of these warring barbecue houses first, and a lot of the plot I had already kind of figured out in my head. But then when I changed the title, then that gave me a framework and that kept me going.
yeah,
And as writers, I think it's all about whatever keeps you going, right?
yeah,
So, when I finished this one, then I turned around and wrote a Christmas novella. Why? Because I wanted to write a Christmas novella. What are we gonna do with it? I don't know. We'll put it out eventually. It'll be
well,
fun.
hopefully in the next month.
Well, no, it's not gonna come out. It needs more editing. It won't be for this Christmas. It'll probably be for next Christmas, but um I mean, I think that's part of it is and two, I really do love that play. I love that play a lot. Especially the Emma Thompson, Kenneth Branagh version, which is why my heroine's named Emma, because I
Mhm.
couldn't find any permutation of Beatrice that I liked. I
Right.
did kind of Romeo and Juliet before with book 2, and part of the reason that one worked is because I'd settled on Julian, and then Romy I found, which was a nickname for Rosemary. So I had Romy and Julian, and that was and a lot of people are like, "That's too cutesy," and I'm like, "Let me have my fun, okay?"
It's funny the little things that you need. Like the little like I've written books where I have not known the characters' names till a quarter of the way through it. Or I've written a
Mhm.
book and then gotten to the end of it and I was like, "Oh, his name is blah blah blah." Like it's really
At this point, I swear it's kind of like, I guess an author's Tourette's syndrome or something. Because my husband's used to me just saying random things. He's watching the ball game, and I'm like, "His name is Neil." And he's like and then he'll go, "Is Neil fictional?" "Yes, dear." "Okay, carry on."
Do I need to worry about Neil?
Yeah. Or it'll be like, "Oh, I have to kill her." He's like, "Whoa, whoa." Or there was the time that I had to resurrect people because I'd killed too many people in that book.
Right.
I'm like, "Oh, they need to be zombies." It's like, "You're writing zombies now?" "No, no, no. Not real zombies. I'm just bringing them back from the dead for the 3rd draft.
I'm
It's
just getting
fine.
rid of
It's
that whole
fine.
chapter that I wrote where they all
Yeah,
died.
it's fine. It's fine. It's all good."
I feel like as a reader coming out of 2020, like part of the what's funny too is because a lot of these retellings that we're reading right now, they were in the shoot before
Oh,
COVID.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
not all of them, but some of them. Um, but the comfort of knowing what's going to happen to some extent. I mean, I think it's why romance, like everybody's reading romance
That's
right
why
now.
we're yeah, why people
It
love
is, but it's the
romance, but
comfort of like I get to feel clever connecting the dots. Oh, look at that, that's clever. And then, but then I also get to
there's the
like,
reassurance,
yeah,
it's like, "Okay, this is gonna turn out okay." But then, hopefully, there are a couple of surprises too, things that you've mixed up, like Shiro and Claudia instead of Hero and Claudio, Hero and
I mean,
Claudio, yeah. Things
we do like a good play on names.
hadn't even had that much yet. This is just my normal facade. It's how I do.
So how was it in 20 writing this COVID baby for you?
Well, I had had a few difficulties before COVID. There was a book that I wrote that we just had to scrap altogether.
Oh,
Yeah. And
that's
then I wrote
never
another
fun.
book and I got the loveliest rejections for it. I mean, it's going to be a great book one day. Somebody's going to publish it. I may publish it. We'll see. Um, but everything's just haywire. So I think that it was more a question of when I was shopping the book. 2020, not a good day to shop, not a
No,
good time
yeah,
to
that
shop.
was hard.
And so
Were you
then
sharpening this book or this was a different book?
this was a different book. This
Oh,
was this
wow.
one I just wrote while I was waiting. When I finished when I finished the Mom Scouts, which is the one that I'm shopping. When I finished the Mom Scouts, I just started writing this one because I had to have something to write. Um, and the Mom Scout's still out there. You know how publishing is.
And right now
It'll
it's so slow. It's so
it's
much slower.
eh.
And to some
So
extent, you don't mind it being a little bit delayed. I mean, I I have a book out in November 2022 and I was like, "Oh, well, we'll be past all this." And now you're looking at what's going on now with supply chain stuff and you're like,
like,
"Are we? Will we?
wait.
Who
Oh,
knows?"
yeah. Well, this one, I like to never gotten my print copies of it. Supply chain issues.
Supply chain issues. It's a
Mhm.
thing. What's the name of the book that you're shopping, the other book?
The Mom Scouts.
Mom Scouts. That sounds super clever, but we're gonna get back we'll talk about that
Yes,
in a second. Let's keep talking about Much Ado About
what you
BBQ.
do. I
So,
will lead you down tangents, Molly. I will do it. We will go down
telling you,
all the
I was
tangents.
we've met once on a very strange run you and I.
Yes.
Remember
Oh,
that?
by the way, my apologies. What I didn't know then that I know now is that I have exercise-induced asthma.
You do?
I
You
do.
were like a runner.
That's why I couldn't keep up with you. I gotta run walk. I can run, but then
Yeah.
I have to walk.
We were grateful. We were super grateful. But before you and I
Well,
met,
anyway.
before you and I met, didn't we like write a book? Like you and I were like holding
We were on
you
Twitter. We were accountability buddies. I've missed you. Yes, we
oh, I
were
know I'm not
doing
counting.
that.
Nobody's accountability.
And then, hey, you remember that time you won a Rita? I
do.
was sitting at your table.
Oh, nice. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a
That's
story
all.
there.
That's
No,
all.
no, no.
That's all a haze.
No, there's a story there
Oh
because
no.
I was there with Tanya Michaels.
Yes.
Yes. Well, funny story. I didn't have a roommate for that conference, and I always have a roommate for conferences, always. But for some reason, I didn't for that one. And that's the point I realized before the Ritas that I couldn't zip up my own dress.
Oh no.
And I'm figuring it's a hotel full of romance writers. What's the big deal? So I go outside and there's a woman walking out and I vaguely remember her and I was like, "Excuse me." And she just kind of stops and does this number right here. And I was like thinking to myself, "Oh no, this is an editor or an agent and she thinks I'm going to pitch my book." But what I said instead was, "Could you please zip up my dress?" And the tension just
Yeah.
and then I get downstairs and it was your editor. So I was sitting at the same
Oh,
table with Shauna Summers, who zipped up my dress because that's how I roll. I
well,
mean,
that's how she
you
rolls
don't ask a
too.
random person to zip up your dress. Ask an editor.
I mean, it must feel like at those. I mean, those conferences. Who knows if we'll ever get those back? But it must feel at those conferences if you're an editor or an agent, like don't
I'd seen
take
it.
eye
I'd seen it
contact.
several times before. I remember Michelle Grakowski, who's absolutely lovely, and I stopped. And this is before I knew her. Like I met her then the next conference when we were bonding over our mutual love of Sir Mix-a-Lot. But that's neither here nor there. But she did the same thing. I stopped to ask for directions
Oh
and
no.
freeze. And then later I realized, oh, this is because people pass manuscripts under bathroom stalls. That's what this is about.
Yeah. It was time for those to end. Maybe something new needs to come, be reborn.
Lots of fun though. I miss my writer people.
Oh my gosh. Don't we ever? Don't we ever? Yeah. These are I thought it's funny, like you think the worst of it's over and we'll like get back to some kind of normal, but you realize that we're just this part of it, this like long tail of
Mhm.
like not normal, but kind of normal is how it is
But
for
the
a
kind
long
of funny
time.
thing is I was reading about the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic, which was not really had anything to do with the Spanish. So my apologies, Spain.
Did you read the Great Influenza as well? John Barry?
I don't think I did. Should I
Oh,
read that?
okay, sorry, that's the one I read. But yes,
Oh,
please,
okay.
let's talk about it.
I was just reading articles about it and in my mind it always been 1918 and then I realized that no, very much like what we're going through right now, it was 1918 into 1919, like to the end of 1919. So, I feel better now because I'm like we're getting there. We're
We're getting
getting there. We're almost to the end of the length of time of the Spanish flu. We're going to make it.
if that's
We're
our
going to make
blueprint.
it. Yeah.
That the thing that I mean, and I know we'll all be wrestling with this, that was so interesting and remains so interesting is that there was never really any art made about the Spanish flu or about those times. It was
Mm-mm.
like it was like collectively every artist was just like, oh, we will not be talking about that, you know? And I feel that
Yeah.
happening in fiction
Yeah.
right now.
Oh,
Like,
we're gonna do it about this too.
yeah.
It's gonna happen. I do remember, however, in anthropology, they sent me out to one of the cemeteries, and that's one of the things they told us to look for. Look for how many gravestones there were from 1918.
And was it
Well, this
shocking in
conversation's
Tennessee?
gone about I'm sorry,
Was it
what?
shocking? I'm assuming it was in
It
Tennessee,
was
right?
shocking to me at the time because I just thought the Spanish flu, I mean, it's just a thing you read about in in your history book, but then you're out in the cemetery and you're like, oh, snap. And you're like,
Like,
oh, that's 4
and no
people
one
in a
told us.
family of 7. What? And then, of course, my boyfriend, now husband, is like, time out. So let me get this straight. You went to a cemetery for extra credit? Yes. Who wouldn't go to a cemetery for extra credit? He's like, not me.
Well, I find it weird that he wouldn't go to a cemetery for extra credit.
He does not like cemeteries. I mean, a true sign of love is that he took me to Oakland Cemetery. They have this thing on Valentine's Day or the day before where they'll take you along and tell you love stories in Atlanta based on the graves in Oakland Cemetery. See, that's love. I knew that was love that he would take me to that.
That's beautiful.
I know, right?
That's beautiful. I have only ever gone to like haunted cemetery walks, not love story walks. Wow. What a beautiful thing.
I'll still go with you to the haunted ones. When next we meet again at random writing conference, I will be your cemetery buddy.
All right. I appreciate that. So anyway, back to your book.
Yes.
So I have to ask a question. I know as a writer that sometimes side characters leap off the page and they
Oh, yeah, yeah.
demand more attention than you thought you might be giving them. I have to ask you, your sweet, sweet pitmaster, was he one of those for you?
Jeremiah. Yes. Well, and he's very, very loosely based. And I say loosely based because I never met Mr. Bill Howard, but Mr. Bill Howard was the actual first pitmaster of the Chester County Barbecue Festival. And I'm from Chester County. So this is one of my many books that's a love letter to home. And so Jeremiah is an amalgamation of interviews I did with Mr. Howard's son,
Oh, wow.
Danny, books that I read. I read all these books on pitmasters, and I made sure that they weren't just the white pitmasters, because that's a real thing. It's too easy for folks to scrub
Right.
history sometimes. And then a lot of the things Jeremiah says, it somehow came out as my own father, which happens from time to time. I remember one of them is she was wanting to take a picture of him and he's like, I'm too ugly, I'll break your camera. See, that's a my fatherism. But yeah, Jeremiah definitely just jumped off the page for me. I loved him from the get-go. I had this vision of him when I started writing, I could see him at the pit and he's got his chair leaned back and he's reading,
Yeah.
and he's just one of these very slow and deliberate people, because when you're cooking whole hog, it's a very slow and deliberate kind of process. But then his wife also, I adored writing her, and the two of them kind of carrying on with each other. I think Shiro's another one that Shiro just did her own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't control Shiro if I tried. She was gonna do what she was gonna do.
Yeah, he was so charming and came to life. And it's interesting that you talk about having had interviews, because I mean, it felt like you really knew him. And I mean, as a reader, as a writer, we all know that there are some characters that you're like, man, I just put that person on the page because someone needed to be on the page, but I don't know if I know him. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like you really did. So how do you go about, how did you reach out to this guy? I mean,
Oh, well, okay, we're gonna go small town here. You ready?
ready.
I played trumpet with I think it's Danny's youngest brother, one of Danny's brothers. So I went to high school and I reached out to him and he said, I don't remember much, but you might want to talk to my older brother. And so then I interviewed Danny.
Wow. And so like how alive is that history in their family?
Well, it was really cool. So I just missed the Chester County Barbecue Festival, and they actually had a Bill Howard Appreciation Day.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like, dagnabbit, that is like one of my goals, to set up a tent at the Chester County Barbecue Festival and sell my books, hopefully next to some fried pie vendors, because it's very hard to get fried pies here. Come on. But I was on vacation, so I'll have to plan for next year and hopefully get my tent and sell my books and be next to the fried pies because
Sally, you're going to
priorities.
sell out. You're going to sell out at that event. Like that. This is you should do the Much Ado About barbecue circuit. Like you should take this puppy on the road. I'm not kidding.
Should. Well, bonus, I get to eat barbecue.
Okay, so this is a book that is about four, but mainly two warring barbecue houses, and you know, incredibly interesting. I found the details about barbecue super interesting. I was of course starving. Like I was like, Adam, just I live in Toronto, Canada. Not to say that there aren't people fighting a good fight, but we might have four anyway. So what did you learn about barbecue, like as you were doing the research? Like were you well versed?
I learned a lot. It started with growing up, and my father would take me to there was a pit in Mifflin's one of those wide spot in the middle of the roads kind of town. And or at least at one point there was, because people tend to pop up, they'll just do barbecue and then they'll go off and do something else. There are some established restaurants, and then there are people who they'll just let's cook a hog. And this must have been the latter. And I can remember vividly going to this little structure. It was basically screen all the way around, because I mean, smoke, you need screen instead of walls. And I can remember my father pointing down at a whole pig in a cinder block pit and pointing out what parts of the hog he wanted. And I really wanted to capture some of that, because growing up to this day, when we go to mom and dad's, there's going to be barbecue, and he will go to a little place like one of the restaurants I described and ask for a pound, 2 pounds of pork, and it'll come in a little cardboard container that's red and white. And we will have sandwiches and baked beans and chips and whatnot, and just literally be in hog heaven, pardon the pun. Now what I learned was the specifics of whole hog and the difference between whole hog and the smoker. And I learned a lot about that. I even took a whole class on barbecue. I have never eaten so much food in one day in my entire life. We started off the day with eggs and biscuits and gravy and sausage. And then at about 11 o'clock, we had some smoked chicken wings because we might have gotten hungry. And then he demonstrated how to do like pork shoulder and how to do brisket. We put that on to cook. And for lunch, then we had some that he prepared. It was like one of those cooking shows where he demonstrated how to do it, but he'd already had some cooking overnight so we could actually eat it. So for lunch, it was pulled pork, brisket, all the sides, baked beans, mac and cheese, coleslaw, the whole bit. Well, I was about ready to take a nap. And the next thing I know, we're moving on to a pork loin that's got dried apricots and stuffing on the inside of it. And then we had to talk about ribs. Clearly, we need to talk about short ribs, spare ribs, all the ribs.
You're there in a classroom. This is you're there and he's.
This was during COVID times. We were not in a classroom. These are my kind of people. It was basically kind of like a converted garage. So we were outdoors with the screen doors and everything. And he was demonstrating all of these different smokers and outside grills and ways to do things. But yeah. And then for supper, it was bringing back the pulled pork and the brisket. Oh, we did 2 chickens too. We did a beer can chicken and a spatchcock chicken. So I don't think I ate the next day. I was just.
You just rolled around.
Yes, research is one of my favorite things, and that is one of my top research days. I do believe that beats the dairy goat farm. And the dairy goat farm is fun, I'll have you know. But my gosh, the eating. So the thing about whole hog versus the smoker is most people are going away from the whole hog because you have parts, obviously, that you don't use.
Right.
And also it's very time and labor intensive because it's at least a 12-hour process, if not longer, depending on whoever's doing it. And then you have to turn the son of a gun over.
The sleep thing was a real issue in the book. I felt for them.
Yeah. Well, there's a pitmaster in Lexington, which is close to Henderson, where I grew up. And I don't think he slept, period, which may have contributed to his early death. God love him, but he was an excellent pit master, and I can remember reading interviews about him that, like, you get on a timer, and I had Jeremiah do this, like, you're just used to getting up and moving every 30 minutes or so because that's when you're getting the coals from the burn barrel, and then you're shoveling them under the hog. And then, of course, the opposite of that is the steamer approach, where you're mainly working with a pork shoulder. You don't have as much waste. You put it in the smoker, off you go.
Right. That had to be a very fun year of research. Your husband is probably like, anyway, about the
Yeah,
barbecue.
he sent me to barbecue class. He's like, "You're gonna have to cook for me as expensive as this is," and I haven't quite held up my end of that bargain yet. But also, I don't want to build a pit in my backyard.
Right. There's some limitations here.
Yeah, I don't have a smoker.
So I have to say, one of the things that I really, I don't know if you heard me. I wasn't feeling well yesterday.
Mhm.
Like
I feel you. I had that, like, not last week, but the week before that, and I just sat there and read and
Oh,
read. That's all I could do.
what a beautiful
And
thing it was.
I mean, but it was fun. So
Yeah. And one of the things, I mean, I'm going to make an assumption. I know that you've been writing for a long time. I'm assuming you've been
Mhm.
reading romance for a long time. I can't
Mhm.
just read any romance novel anymore. Like it's a
I can't
real,
either.
like it's a real needle.
And right now I'm kind of blocked. It's almost like I've been on an Agatha Christie kick. It's like, kill somebody or I'm not interested.
Wow.
And that's a problem in and of itself.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot out there right now. I mean, domestic thrillers are,
Yes.
I mean, you can't go 4 steps without tripping over a domestic thriller. But I just loved your approach, your pacing of the romance. So like
Oh, well,
we
thank
meet
you.
these two and there's immediate sparks, they're angry sparks, but we know. Um and you tease us with this information about, the things that happened in their past. And then you don't just tease us, but then you make it you up the stakes by the fact that she's gone to a therapist because she doesn't remember part of
Mhm.
her life. So, like, how was the pacing of the romance? How did you?
I mean, I really appreciate this because sometimes the romance, because I write what they call mainstream with romantic elements. So I've always considered it romance, but it's not a typical contemporary where there's so much focus on the couple because I always get sidetracked by the side characters. Um, and there was the therapy aspect. I knew I had to address in one way, shape, or form because there was so much trauma there. And I was just trying to find a way to bring them closer and closer and closer together, knowing that at some point it's all going to hit the fan and they're going to
Right.
take a huge step back. And again, the Much Ado framework helped a lot with that because that's basically Much Ado is these two people are at each other's throats, at each other's throats, at each other's throats. And then they kind of get tricked into falling for each other. And then they deny it. And of course, here comes this is the letter, and this is the this, and she said this, and he said that. And I think some folks didn't get that from the play, maybe, but
They didn't get that part of the play, or they didn't get the
or well, they
connection.
didn't they thought that my romance was too pat. And
Who's saying this? What nonsense!
I
I'll
had
talk to
some
him.
criticism. I tried to fix it as best I could, but I was like, yeah, I think this is how this would really happen. Now, the one that got me cracked up was someone said they didn't think that any teacher would allow a student to sit that close to their bully. And I laughed because this happens every time. Somebody will say something that's completely unrealistic, and I'm like, oh, that's the part that really happened to me. That's the part.
Yeah.
That's the part I put in there. I really did have a pair of white fringe boots, and I really did at one point turn around and kick the shins on some boy who was irritating the snot out of me in Tennessee history. That part was true.
Yeah, that part wouldn't. Well, I mean, I think one of the things about romance is that if the characters are real to the reader,
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, like then you're like, of course that's how that would happen, right? If the characters are real, then that all makes sense. I mean, there are some pacing issues that you're like, man, I love this book so much, but oh my God, just, or whatever. But I
Oh,
just
I
think
really
it,
appreciate that because that's one of the things I work on to try to make sure that it's, that you keep
yeah,
turning the pages, that the story is progressing.
for sure. For sure. So this is the sixth book in this series.
Mhm.
Um, how are you, and you have Easter eggs for the other books. You have characters
Mhm.
come in, and characters
I
playing a
do.
huge part. I mean, thank God you've got a character that can talk to ghosts, right? I mean,
Ah,
she's gonna
well, what
show
I
up all the time.
typically I'll write a book and then somebody will come in. They just come and they go. So the idea is to hopefully write it as a standalone. And then if
Mhm.
you want to go back and learn more about Presley and why she talks to ghosts, then you can go back to Better Get to Living and see what happened there. But yeah, that's one of my faves. That's my actress who fell in love with the funeral director, as one does.
Sure, I bought it.
Mhm.
So, do you find are there plans to leave this town? Are there plans to stay in this town? Like, how hard is it to keep this town? I mean, it's a small town. Is there an element of this that you're
I
like, I got to get out of town?
Not yet. I'm not sure that I have another story for Ellery yet, but I mean, if I have one, then I'll come back and write one, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
I do have loose ends. Um, I don't think I've managed to get poor Beulah and Luke married yet. So
That's been a
I
while.
have,
That has been a
yeah,
while.
I have, I have some loose ends,
So, what are
but that's
you?
life.
That's yeah, and it's like I feel like that's a really healthy attitude about um, writing successful series. I mean, you know, in COVID, I had to cancel I mean, this is a series that I was
Mhm.
self-publishing, and I had to cancel a pre-order because I was like, I'm fine. COVID's no problem. Everybody's home and I can do everything. And then I was like,
And
oh
then you're
God.
like,
Oh my
"No,
God.
I can't." Mm-mm. Do you have any kids you had to
Yeah, they
remote
were
teach?
they were both home, but they were not young enough that
Mm,
I had to do any teaching. How about you? Did
okay.
you have kids you had to teach?
Let's see, when all these shenanigans started, I had one at 8th grade and I had a senior,
Oh,
my poor senior. And he's pretty self-sufficient, but, my youngest has ADHD. So, remote learning, not the best for them.
no.
They are not keen on the remote learning, and I do not blame them. But
Yeah.
they're back in school
And doing great and
and
doing better.
doing much better, and we're gonna keep going.
And your oldest, has he gone off to school or is he taking
He
a
is in Spain right now.
amen. Awesome.
He went off to the, University of Delaware, and he's currently studying abroad in Madrid.
He was like, I couldn't go anywhere last year. Now I'm going everywhere. And that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a world scholar with their program, so he was supposed to have gone to Spain his freshman year, but instead he was taking classes in what we like to call the upstairs annex, AKA the bonus room above our garage.
I mean, I feel like that's the other part. Actually, the only stories I want to hear coming out of COVID, and not for a while, but I want
Mhm.
to talk about how moms and dads um, creatively solved all these problems that were suddenly home. I don't I'm here for those stories. Not right now, but
No. Well,
soon.
fortunately, most of the time around here, it was just laughter. It was just, "This is absurd. We're gonna laugh our way through it."
That's good.
Yes,
And I feel like that
fortunately.
kind of attitude is what makes your book so damn delightful, Sally.
Oh, thank you.
It really is.
That's the goal.
So I know you can't. What can you tell us about Mom Scouts? Because I would like to read it. Where is it?
Would
What's
you?
happening? Yeah, Mom Scouts. What's going on?
Um,
Can you tell
vi
us a little bit about it?
it's gonna be my first book set in suburban Atlanta,
Ooh,
and, it is, well, I don't wanna give the whole thing away, but basically Vivian she has a YouTube channel. Her son has gone off to college, and she is trying to get used to an empty nest. He's her only. and she has a YouTube channel, but it doesn't really take off. She's like, it doesn't really take off until she makes a drunken video after her husband leaves her, and then it kind of goes viral. And her whole thing is she does badges, and sometimes there are things like, here's your badge for getting the kid to school on time, or here's our badge for one of them I took was, this was a real life story. My youngest had this dress that they needed for band, and it came unhemmed, and I was like, does this look like the face of a woman who sews? I did not take home ec. They made me take advanced math instead.
Oh
Thanks,
no.
guys. So, I started Googling, as we Gen Xers do, and found this stuff called hem tape. And so I basically glued a hem on that dress using hem tape. And so,
Perfect.
that's your quote unquote sewing badge as a Mom Scout. So,
Oh, I really like the sound of this. I can't wait to read it.
yes.
Someone's going to grab it. Give publishing another 6 months to calm their jets. To
We're
cool
just gonna leave it there. Yeah, because my favorite part, the way that story came to me, is I envisioned these moms sitting in a cul-de-sac, and they've been doing this for a while. They've watched their kids grow up from, we're sitting in the cul-de-sac watching them on their scooters and their bicycles and whatnot, and now they just get together and they drink wine and Cheez-Its.
Yeah.
And that's the wine and
Mom
Cheez-It
Scout.
badge. But
I'd like to be part of this scout group. Well, Sally, thank you so much for not just this great book, but for spending some time with me tonight. I said, like, what did I say? 20 to 30 minutes? Here we are. Double.
Oh, oops. It's my tangents. Thank you so much for having me, though. I
Oh,
appreciate that.
Sally, it's so good to see you. And I really, really hope that we're able to see each other in person again and go for a
Here's hoping. A
slow
walk,
walk.
a slow walk, and then still get the breakfast burritos, though, because
Yes. Oh my
I remember the
gosh.
breakfast
I
burritos.
do remember those. I love that. Bev, hi. Oh, here we've got some comments. Sorry, guys.
Oh, okay.
Name of the book again? Much Ado About BBQ is the name of the book, Bev. Much
Indeed.
Ado About BBQ. And it's super charming. It's a retelling of Much Ado About Nothing between two warring barbecue houses. And it's a very good enemies to lovers romance.
Thank
But
you.
also it's really like, I don't know, it's about this town and it's about Jeremiah.
It's
It is about barbecue. It's pretty fabulous. So thank you. Thanks, Sally, for coming out.
Thank you.
Everybody, everybody out there, grab a drink, read a book, stay safe. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.